In 190 AD, China faced a year of darkness and chaos. The Han Empire was on the verge of collapse, with the emperor held hostage by the notorious warlord Dong Zhuo. To combat a powerful enemy of over 200,000 troops led by Yuan Shao, Dong Zhuo unleashed a reign of terror. He set the grand city of Luoyang on fire, forcing its over 500,000 residents into a brutal march during the harsh winter. As the civil war continued, Dong Zhuo's cruelty reached unimaginable levels. He took pleasure in frying prisoners alive and turning banquets into gruesome spectacles. When he was finally assassinated, many believed that the world would improve without him, but did it really? Welcome to Who Was the Real Dong Zhuo? Behind the Total War 3 Kingdoms, Part 2. In January 190 AD, when Dong Zhuo learned Yuan Shao had gathered an army of over 200,000 to overthrow him, he felt deeply betrayed. He had given these nobles high-ranking positions to appease them at the expense of his own supporters. Instead of being grateful, they formed a rebel army against him. Dong Zhuo knew his background couldn't compare to theirs, but he still couldn't understand why they looked down on him, even though he had achieved so much. Furious, he paced the palace, roaring, "Why? Why did they do this to me?" From that moment, he decided he wouldn't appease anyone. He must instill fear into their hearts. So he ordered the execution of all Yuan Shao's families and relatives in Luoyang, sending a chilling message to all. Although Dong Zhuo was brutal, his analysis of his enemies was correct. He believed that if he held out long enough, the alliance against him would collapse. Yuan Shao had gathered all the powerful warlords of the realm, but their armies were loyal only to them, neither to Yuan Shao nor the emperor. Conflicts soon arose within the allied forces, even between Yuan Shao and his own brother Yuan Shu, because these warlords realized that if they defeated Dong Zhuo, they would have to contend with each other in the future. As a result, after some initial attempts and defeats, no one wanted to lead an offensive and risk their troops. However, two people were different, Sun Jian and Cao Cao. Sun Jian, in particular, was a formidable fighter and the only one Dong Zhuo truly feared. Yet, Sun quickly faced sabotage from his so-called allies. In February 191 AD, after winning a battle against Dong Zhuo, Sun Jian planned to press the attack, but found his food and fodder hadn't arrived. It turned out that his boss, Yuan Shu, fearing Sun Jian's capture of Luoyang would make him too powerful, had withheld all supplies. Furious, Sun Jian returned from the front line overnight to confront Yuan Shu, saying, "I risk my life to fight for the country and avenge your family. I have no personal grudge against Dong Zhuo, but you believe slander and doubt me. Why?" Shamed, Yuan Shu promised to provide the supplies immediately. Under Sun Jian's assault, Dong Zhuo suffered continuous defeats. After analyzing the situation, Dong Zhuo decided to retreat to Chang'an in the west, taking the emperor. But it wasn't a regular retreat. What he did next would stun everyone. Chang'an, located 200 miles from Luoyang, was far easier to defend due to its geographical advantage. But Dong Zhuo didn't just want to relocate. He wanted to take everyone and everything in the capital with him, leaving nothing for his enemies. When asked how he planned to do this, he responded, "Move the population and burn the city. Burn it all." Officials were shocked, as Luoyang had over 500,000 people. Even Lü Bu was startled and asked why. Dong Zhuo laughed and said, "We do this for the good of the empire. The sacrifice of some civilians is necessary. Remember, just kill anyone who won't move and burn the city. Then they will have no choice but to follow us. I can say you've become weak now. Just don't let me down." After killing some officials who opposed his idea, no one dared to challenge Dong Zhuo anymore. So, in January 190 AD, the plan was implemented. Until that moment, Luoyang had been the capital for 165 years, serving as the empire's political, economic, and cultural center. But Dong Zhuo reduced it to rubble in days, as flames consumed the entire city. Soldiers plundered all the treasures and took them to Chang'an. Tragically, the imperial libraries were destroyed. Although some books were relocated to Chang'an, half were lost along the way. It was a harsh winter. Moving over 500,000 people wasn't easy. Dong Zhuo's army split the civilians into groups and escorted them. Anyone who resisted or tried to escape was killed. The 200-mile pass to the west was littered with bodies. Blood turned the snowy landscape red. As flames devoured Luoyang, Dong Zhuo didn't forget any treasure buried under the ground. He ordered soldiers to loot the tombs of emperors and nobles, leaving their remains scattered everywhere. The warlords were puzzled by the massive fire in Luoyang, knowing that only Sun Jian's troops were fighting, and he hadn't yet entered the city. They hurried to higher ground to see what was happening. Sun Jian was also shocked and confused. He quickly led his troops into the city, only to find that the once prosperous capital was now a wasteland, with wild dogs and vultures feeding on corpses. Seeing such apocalyptic scenes made Sun Jian and his soldiers weep. Under the new order, they tried their best to find and comfort survivors and bury the bodies. When it was confirmed that Dong Zhuo had left Luoyang, the other warlords, fearing Sun Jian might capture everything, entered the empty city a few days later. Now, another question emerged. Should they pursue Dong Zhuo westward? While the other warlords tried to avoid this discussion, Sun Jian's forces had already marched west and engaged Dong Zhuo's army. There's also another person worth mentioning, Cao Cao. While Sun Jian's troops fought along, Cao Cao urged the others to march west, but failed. So, he led his force of fewer than 10,000 soldiers to march west. A few days later, his army was ambushed and nearly wiped out. Even Cao Cao was almost captured. Back at headquarters, Cao Cao was furious. He urged Yuan Shao to launch a full-scale attack immediately, but Yuan Shao dismissed the idea as always. Disappointed, Cao Cao punched the table and left. His disdain for Yuan Shao deepened. Knowing he wouldn't get solid support from his allies, Sun Jian fought along and bravely. But he soon realized that his allies were more treacherous than he had expected. While fighting on the front line, he learned one of his allies had just taken his newly acquired territory near Luoyang. Apparently, turf wars had already started. Hearing this, tears streamed down his face. Sun Jian told his generals, "We raised arms to save the country, but now we fight among ourselves. Who can I trust? Who can I trust?" Deeply disappointed, he led his army off the battlefield the next day. The coalition collapsed shortly afterward. The coalition's collapse made Dong Zhuo feel relieved. Now he could fully indulge in his pleasure of torturing people. His cruelty had increasingly become more disturbing as time went on. After a battle, he captured many of Sun Jian's soldiers. He ordered his soldiers to wrap them in cloths like a mummy, cover them with lard, hang them up, and threw them into frying cauldrons, just like frying some chicken wings. Their screams delighted him and made him laugh. Another time, he held a banquet for officials. When they thought it would be a regular banquet, nearly 100 prisoners were suddenly brought in and vivisected. Their body parts were grilled in front of the horrified guests, causing many officials to faint, vomit, or suffer heart attacks. Dong Zhuo was laughing wildly at their reactions. Not only that, he also allowed his men to carry out mass killings of civilians wherever his soldiers were stationed. People living there were slaughtered, women were raped, and buildings were burned to the ground. He just thought this was a reward to his men for their loyalty. After learning what he did, it's not hard for us to know that Dong Zhuo had countless enemies. Among them, a minister called Wang Yun had a plan, and most importantly, he won over Dong Zhuo's most trusted general and bodyguard, Lu Bu. According to one source, Lu Bu had an affair with one of Dong Zhuo's maids. It is unknown whether Dong Zhuo knew this, but he did threaten Lu Bu several times, which always kept Lu Bu on edge. Finally, Lu Bu joined Wang Yun's plot. May 22, 192 AD was just another normal day for Dong Zhuo. When he was about to enter his carriage to travel to the royal court, the horse reared up and he was knocked down. So he went back home to change clothes, and a concubine warned him not to go that day, but he insisted. He didn't know that under Lu Bu's order, a dozen warriors disguised as his guards were waiting inside the palace. As he entered, a guard immediately stabbed him. In despair, he called for Lu Bu. Lu Bu stepped forward, saying, "I'm here. Now I'm ending your evil life by the emperor's order." He then drove his spear into Dong Zhuo's heart. Someone just cut off his head and carried it around the city. People were ecstatic. They celebrated Dong Zhuo's death with wine, dancing, and singing all day and night. Then his fat corpse was displayed in the marketplace, and people lit lamps on his body fat that burned for days. Everyone thought it was the end of the story, but it wasn't. Hearing Dong Zhuo's death, his generals brought troops to Chang'an. They killed Dong Zhuo's enemies. A cycle of revenge began. According to some records, when they tried to bury his ashes, a storm broke out. Lightning struck the coffin, and heavy rain caused it to float in the grave. While some details may be exaggerated, as people always make up such stories to show that God cursed Dong Zhuo, one thing is clear: his death didn't bring peace. The chaos he caused would continue for generations.